It's a consistent theme on my channel that there are people that use words and don't know what these words mean. People don't know what words mean and then continue to use those words in confidence. Race is not an exception to this rule. It's become apparent to me over the past few years that people don't know what race actually is, and it's so funny because they use the word race interchangeably with other better words that they should be using for the particular situation. The inspiration for this video came from a couple TikTok screenshots from Twitter that sort of went viral, and basically here are the screenshots. So, yeah. First and foremost, I would like to say, how funny is it that when black people call out other people of color for their behavior, other people of color come out of the woodworks and, start to present their anti-blackness that they were hiding. Like, they were waiting for this moment. They were waiting to be anti-black assholes. Reminder, folks, there's no such thing as solidarity, not in the queer community, not within people of color, and certainly not between those two groups. There is no such thing as solidarity. The second thing I'd like to say is the amount of people that say black is not a race, it's a color. I'm starting to think that each and every one of us do not have a brain. We have a brick in our skulls. There is a brick in the place of your brain. None of us can think. There is no thinking going on. I'm thinking you're all fucking stupid. Each and every one of us. Dumb. We are dumbasses. Hey, fuckface. That's what race is. I'm so tired of people not knowing the words that they're using. So let's talk about the difference between ethnicity and race. Ethnicity is like culture. Hispanic is an ethnicity. Hispanic is not a race. Ethnicity is real in that these cultures are real. They're actually practiced cultures. They have a fundamental basis in different societies across the world. Ethnicity is real. Race, on the other hand, was made up by white Europeans during the colonization eras as a way to justify their abuse of people in other continents that didn't look like them. Race theory was created by white people to oppress people. Race theory is not real. At this point, I should say in bold, underlined, and in italics, race theory not being real fundamentally does not mean it's not real systemically. Unfortunately, especially in the West, a lot of our systems are literally based upon race theory. A lot of shit that you don't think is based upon race and has nothing to do with race actually does have to do with race. Like, people will say, like, not everything has to be about race, but, like, it does end up always being about race, especially in the West. I actually learned the other day that abortion was mostly legal, like, in the law, until 1860. What happened in the 1860s? The slaves were released. Why would they need to make abortion illegal? Because farmers don't have slaves anymore and they need to use their children for unpaid labor. So they're going to force their wives to become baby-making machines to make a bunch of, unpaid children to do their farmer work. Everything, especially in the West, is based on race. I swear to God. So systemically, race is real. Fundamentally and genetically, race isn't real. It's a social construct created by white people to oppress other people so that they could, take their resources and, sell them into slavery. Which is why when we talk about race, we have to talk about it within the context of European colonization. Race is not real, and it is based only upon the color of your skin and your facial features. That is it. That's what race is. Race is how you look. When you start talking about cultures, that's an ethnicity problem. These two things tend to cross over because, white people will associate a race, how you look, with certain cultural practices and then condemn those cultural practices as well. That's sort of how they start to intertwine. And, it's a bit more nuanced and fluid there because of, association psychology. That is the basics of it. Ethnicity is the culture. Race is literally just how you look. And the idea that how you look and looking closer to someone else creates an entirely different race within humans is fundamentally flawed, because there have been findings that show that, there's larger genetic differences within people in Africa than between people in Africa and Eurasians. There is no, fundamental science there to back up race theory. Racist Europeans in the 1700s and racist people from the United States in the 1800s really tried it. They did, they tried it, but the science does not back it up. A formal race theory was created by Johann Blumenbach, a German guy, but he proposed that there are 5 races. The way he declared these races makes it seem like they were based upon region, but truly at heart they were based upon how you looked. And scientists back then were also obsessed with skull size. His theory was pretty based on skull size as well, which is fucking weird. The 5 races he came up with were Caucasian, Mongolian, Malayan, Ethiopian, and American. That roughly translates to, and I'm going to use certain terms that might be considered derogatory. Please understand that this is within an academic context and it's not, and don't use these words in a derogatory way towards these group of people, please. That roughly translates to white, yellow, brown, black, and red. That's what race is. Race is a plethora of colors and the facial features that go along with them. Hispanic is not a race. Did you know that you could be white and a Hispanic? Hi, white Cubans. You can mostly be any race, and be within an ethnic group. There are black, brown, and white Latinos. Latino is not a race because there are black, brown, and white Latinos, and red. Lele Pons is a white Latina because her race is white, her ethnicity is Latina, as she will not let us forget. And fun fact, nationality could also be different from ethnicity. There are ethnically Chinese folks in the United States. Their nationality is American. Their race is, apologize, yellow. Technically, because that's what race is. Okay, side rant. Asian is not a race. Asian is a fucking continent. In Asia, there are several races. There are brown, white, and yellow people. Asian is not one race because there are 3 races in Asia. I understand that it's kind of like an attempt to be politically correct. I understand that it's, if used in a non-academic context, it's considered derogatory. I get it, but that's not race. Stop saying Asian is a race. It's not. And the thing is, race isn't, as I've said before, it's not only skin color, right? It's also facial features, hence why certain very, very light-skinned folks, black, brown, etc., are still considered non-white. There's a lot of fighting about certain Middle Eastern ethnicities and whether or not they're considered black, brown, etc. It's really their facial features that will determine whether or not they are a certain race or not. I have a Mexican friend that would still be considered brown because of her facial features, despite having lighter skin than I. Basically, this is why race isn't real, because it's a bunch of bullshit. But like, I always get annoyed when people are like, oh, but what about Jewish people? My answer to that is that there are black Jewish people, there are white Jewish people, there are brown Jewish people. Jewish is not a race. Jewish is an ethno-religion. Repeat after me, ethno-religion. It's an ethnicity, not a race. And it just makes me laugh when people like unironically say shit like you're being racist towards Italians, because it's like, Italian's not a race, you dumb fuck. Italian is a nationality or ethnicity. Italians are white. White is the race. Italian is not the race. I'm so tired of this. But it makes me laugh because it's so dumb. Like, the entire statement is just, it feels like it should be ironic, but it's not, and that's why it's so funny. But then it stresses me out afterwards, because why don't you know what these words mean? And that's why the joke in Eli and I's past videos are like, haha, we're being racist towards Italians. That's part of the joke, is that Italian is not a race. Italian is a nationality or ethnicity. That's why the joke is funny. Alright, glad we've cleared that up. All this rambling aside, I feel like I do need to acknowledge that obviously this shit is kind of nuanced sometimes, and black is not only a race anymore, but it's also an ethnicity. Let me explain. Being a black American is its own ethnicity now, it's its own culture now. And that was because black people had a very unique experience. Black Americans had a very unique experience in comparison to the rest of the world, where, you know, they were taken from Africa. African peoples with several hundred different cultures. Like, they didn't all have the same culture. It's not a monolith, right? But they were cut off from those cultures and shipped off to the Americas to be sold into slavery and to, generationally forget their original cultures that they were from, their ethnicity. Specifically in the United States, these black people band together and almost created their own new culture separate from Africa, with little pieces of it still. Black is both a race and an ethnicity, and it's one of the only situations where that's the truth because of the uniqueness of the situation. Blackness as an ethnicity was built upon blackness as a race, because that's what black people's entire existence was in the Americas, the United States specifically. It's kind of hard to separate them in that case. That's the difference between the two. Please stop using them interchangeably. Know when something is an ethnic prejudice and when it's a racial prejudice, and where there are inherent biases that may conjoin the two. I think a good example of this was when people were being prejudiced against Chinese folks when COVID became a thing, because people were saying it was racism, right? But it was against Chinese people. I feel like on the surface it wasn't racism. Like, the surface level anti-Chinese propaganda was not racism on the surface, but I do feel like there was some internal shit going on where it did have to do with their racial biases as well. So, be able to critically examine situations like that. And the reason why I know that there was definitely some internal shit going on was because white Americans, duh, but also because Japanese and Korean people and other, East Asian people from the same race, the yellow race or whatever, we're also getting harassed. And that is inherently a race problem there, because other people that looked a bit similar were also getting harassed. So that's a race problem. Being anti-Chinese can be a race problem under the surface for sure. But on the surface, being anti-Chinese is just being, there's a word for it. I don't know if I'm gonna say it right. Xenophobic? Sinophobic?
And xenophobia, on the other hand.
Sinophobia? Sinophobia. Okay. It'd be more sinophobia, if anything, which is, anti-Chinese prejudice. I do think that there's usually underlying racism to blatant ethnic prejudice. There's always seems to be an underlying racism. They do go hand in hand. I'm not going to act like they don't, but you need to understand the difference. Just know the difference between these words before you say things, please.